My name is Barbara Moore, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my adult life, I believe that stability came from discipline, working hard, saving carefully, and never expecting anything extraordinary. Luck was something that happened to other people, people who bought tickets on a whim, people who didn't calculate every risk twice. And then, against all logic, luck chose us. About a year ago, my boyfriend Ethan and I won the lottery. Not the kind of jackpot that turns you into a headline or ruins your privacy, but enough to permanently shift the ground beneath our feet. Enough that the constant background anxiety, the one that whispered, "What if something goes wrong?" finally went silent. We were careful, almost obsessively so. The first thing we did was pay off our mortgage. Signing those final papers felt surreal, like stepping out of a long tunnel into daylight. Then we bought a new car to replace our aging one that had become a roulette wheel of warning lights. After that, we invested most of the remaining money, listened to professionals, and made sure we weren't doing anything reckless. When everything was settled, we still had more left than we ever imagined we would. That's when people started paying attention. Ethan's family never outright asked for anything. They didn't need to. His mother, Linda, had a way of planting ideas without ever claiming ownership of them. She'd sigh whenever travel commercials came on TV, remarking how she'd never really had a proper vacation. She'd joke, though it never sounded like a joke, about how nice it must be to live without financial stress. His younger sister Rachel would laugh and say things like, "Well, I guess we know who's paying next time," then wave it off like she was kidding. My parents, on the other hand, never hinted, never joked, never expected. But I noticed the way my mother lingered on photos of beaches and ocean sunsets online, her finger hovering over the screen, like she didn't quite believe those places were meant for people like her. That's what finally pushed me. I suggested to Ethan that we take both families on a vacation, a real one, fully paid, flights, hotel, meals, activities, everything covered. No one would have to worry about money. No one would feel left out. In my mind, it was going to be a gift of connection, a shared experience that would bring everyone closer, erase old tensions, and maybe, just maybe, help Linda see me as more than the girl her son happened to be dating. Ethan loved the idea, so we planned it carefully. A tropical destination, a luxury resort, enough space so no one felt cramped, but enough shared time to feel like a family. I imagined laughter, relaxation, gratitude. That illusion began cracking the moment we landed. The humidity hit us as soon as we stepped off the plane, warm and heavy in that unmistakable tropical way. I took a deep breath, smiling. Linda scowled. "Oh, this air is awful," she complained, waving her hand in front of her face. "It's so thick, I can barely breathe." We hadn't even reached baggage claim. As we waited for our luggage, she continued about the heat, the smell of the air, how her clothes already felt sticky. Through customs, she sighed loudly. On the drive to the resort, she complained about traffic, about the sun, about how uncomfortable she felt. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, reminding myself to be patient. Ethan squeezed my hand more than once, a silent apology he didn't know how else to give. When we arrived at the resort, I hoped, foolishly, that things would improve. We had booked the best oceanfront suites available for both sets of parents. Spacious rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, breathtaking views, and private pools just steps from the bedrooms. The kind of rooms people save for years to experience once. My parents were stunned. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, eyes shining, whispering that she couldn't believe this was real. My father stood quietly by the window, staring out at the ocean like it might disappear if he blinked. Linda walked into her room and frowned. "It's too bright," she said flatly. I thought she was joking at first. The sunlight poured into the room, illuminating the water outside in shimmering blues. Apparently that was a problem. She complained that the room had too much light, that she would have preferred something more private. She pointed at the pool and said she didn't like having water so close to the room, as if it posed some kind of threat. Ethan's father tried to calm her, suggesting she close the blackout curtains if the light bothered her. Linda ignored him and turned on Ethan instead. "You really couldn't book something better?" she snapped. "Better than the best room in the resort." By then, my head was pounding. I excused myself and went to check on my parents instead, needing the reminder that not everyone saw generosity as an inconvenience. They were still marveling at everything, taking photos, thanking us repeatedly like they were afraid the opportunity might vanish. After lunch, we suggested spending the afternoon at the beach. Linda refused immediately. Too sunny, Too many mosquitoes. She stayed behind without another word. The rest of us went anyway, and for a few hours, everything felt right. We swam, laughed, played with the kids, and let ourselves enjoy the moment. When we headed back, we picked up dinner for Linda, not wanting her to feel excluded. She was furious. She accused Ethan of abandoning her, of leaving her alone. When he offered her the food, she rejected it, snapping that she had already eaten and didn't want his pity. That night, lying in bed with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open balcony doors, I stared at the ceiling and felt a slow, sinking realization settle into my chest. This trip wasn't about bonding. It was about control, and something told me that Linda wasn't finished reminding us who she thought really held it. The next morning was supposed to be the highlight of the entire trip. Ethan had planned it weeks in advance, a private family cruise, chartered just for us. No crowds, no strangers, just open water, sun, food, and time together. It was meant to be the kind of experience people talked about years later, the one everyone agreed had been the best day. I woke up cautiously optimistic. Maybe Linda had just been overwhelmed the day before. Maybe once she was out on the water, with nothing to complain about, she'd relax. That hope didn't last long. As we gathered in the hotel lobby, my eyes were drawn immediately to Linda's ears. She was wearing her diamond earrings, the ones she treated like an extension of her identity. She loved telling people they were an anniversary gift, loved emphasizing how valuable and irreplaceable they were. A knot tightened in my stomach. Linda had always been careless with her belongings. Phones left behind, wallets misplaced. And today, we'd be on a boat for hours, surrounded by water. I hesitated, then spoke gently, keeping my voice light. "Linda," I said, "since we'll be out on the boat all day, maybe you want to leave those in the room safe, or just be extra careful." She shot me a look sharp enough to cut. "Oh, don't start," she snapped. "I know how to take care of my own things. I'm not a child." The message was clear. I'd crossed a line just by suggesting it. So I backed off. For a brief while on the boat, things were tolerable. The kids laughed. The breeze was warm. The water stretched endlessly in every direction. Ethan's father even smiled, leaning against the railing with a drink in hand. Linda sat stiffly, fanning herself, muttering about the heat, but nothing explosive. Until the scream. It came out of nowhere, sharp, panicked, and loud enough to freeze everyone in place. "My earrings!" Linda shrieked. She was digging frantically through her purse, hands shaking, breath coming in short, frantic bursts. Ethan and I rushed over, asking what was wrong. "They're gone," she said, her voice rising. "They're gone." She explained that she'd taken them off earlier because she felt hot and tossed them into her purse. Now they weren't there. My stomach dropped. Everyone joined the search. We checked her purse again, her seat, the floor, the nearby areas of the deck. I tried to stay calm, but dread crept in as the minutes passed. We were surrounded by ocean. If those earrings had fallen overboard, there was no getting them back. Linda's panic shifted quickly into something darker. "Someone must have taken them." "That's ridiculous," Ethan said, laughing nervously. "Mom, it's just family. Who would steal from you?" Linda's eyes snapped toward me. She didn't hesitate. "It was you," she said, pointing directly at me. For a moment, I couldn't even process what she'd said. "What?" I whispered. Her voice rose, sharp and accusing, so everyone could hear. She said I'd noticed the earrings too much, that I'd warned her earlier, that I must have been watching when she put them in her purse. According to her, that meant I'd planned it. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. "I warned you because I was worried," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I would never steal from you. Why would I?" She scoffed. "Oh, don't pretend," she sneered. "You and your parents have never had money. Suddenly you see something valuable and you get ideas." The words hit like a slap. She kept going, dragging my parents into it, calling them low class, saying they'd raised me to take advantage of opportunities like this. She insisted Ethan and her grandchildren would never steal from her, which left only one option. Me. My face burned. "You can insult me all you want," I snapped, my voice shaking. "But you do not get to talk about my parents that way." Linda lunged forward. She grabbed my purse without warning and started digging through it right there on the deck, her fingers frantic, invasive. Ethan shouted at her to stop, his voice booming, but I raised a hand. "Let her look." She found nothing. Then she turned toward my mother and went for her purse. That was the breaking point. My mother screamed, her voice trembling with fury, demanding Linda give it back. Ethan stepped between them, snatching the bag out of his mother's hands and blocking her. "Back off, Mom," he shouted. "You've completely lost it." Linda was beyond reason now. She stormed toward the captain, screaming that the boat needed to turn around immediately. She wanted the police. She wanted us arrested. "If you didn't steal anything," she yelled, "then you shouldn't have a problem with a police report." I looked at Ethan, my chest tight. We were past logic, past calm explanations, past family. The captain turned the boat around. As the shoreline slowly came back into view, a sickening realization settled over me. This wasn't about earrings anymore. Linda had chosen her version of the story, and she was willing to burn everything else down to protect it. The moment our feet touched the dock, Linda was already dialing her phone. She didn't wait. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look back at Ethan or at the stunned faces around her. She paced back and forth near the marina, voice loud and trembling with self-righteous fury as she reported a theft. Her theft. Ethan tried to stop her. His father begged her to calm down. Even Rachel looked uncomfortable, standing a few steps behind her mother with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Linda ignored all of it. By the time the police arrived, she had rehearsed her narrative so thoroughly that she delivered it like testimony. She pointed at me first, then my parents. She explained, confidently, why we were the only logical suspects. Her certainty was terrifying. The officers were professional, calm, and detached. They asked questions. They separated us. They took notes. And because there was no immediate evidence either way, they did what they were required to do. They questioned everyone, including my parents. Watching my mother answer questions from strangers, questions that implied she might be a thief, felt like watching something sacred being dismantled piece by piece. Her voice shook as she spoke. She kept apologizing even though she had done nothing wrong. My father stood silent beside her, jaw clenched, eyes hard with humiliation he didn't know how to express. Then came the searches. When the officer asked to check our bags, my mother's composure finally cracked. Her hands trembled as she handed over her purse. I saw her blink rapidly, trying to hold back tears as someone rifled through her personal belongings. Linda watched with her arms crossed, satisfied. I wanted to scream. We had paid for everything, every flight, every meal, every room. And here my parents were, being treated like criminals because Linda needed someone to blame. Then one of the officers said something none of us had considered. "There are security cameras on the boat," he said. "We're going to review the footage." The marina went quiet. We all gathered around as the footage was pulled up on a tablet. The officer fast-forwarded through the video, scanning the deck from different angles. Seconds passed. Then my breath caught. The camera showed Linda standing near her seat. Her purse was open. She was distracted, talking animatedly to someone out of frame. And then Rachel. Ethan's sister glanced around. Once. Twice. She leaned in casually, reached into her mother's purse, and pulled out the earrings. In one smooth motion, she slipped them into her own bag. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. There was no ambiguity, no question, no room for interpretation. The officer paused the footage. Linda stared at the screen, frozen. Her mouth hung open. The color drained from her face as if someone had turned off the lights behind her eyes. The officers searched Rachel's purse. The earrings were there. Rachel's face flushed a deep, painful red. She stammered, claiming maybe one of her kids had put them there by mistake. But the officer shook his head. "The footage shows you taking them," he said calmly. "This wasn't an accident." Rachel broke down crying. Ethan lost his temper. He demanded to know how she could stand there silently while our parents were interrogated, while my mother was humiliated, while Linda screamed accusations at me for hours. Rachel didn't answer him. She turned instead to Linda, apologizing through sobs. And Linda? Linda changed instantly. She told the officers she didn't want to press charges, said it was a misunderstanding, that her daughter was going through a hard time, that this wasn't like her. I stood there in disbelief. She had been ready to destroy us without hesitation, but now that the truth pointed inward, she wanted it erased. The police left, and with them, whatever was left of the vacation. We avoided Linda and Rachel for the rest of the trip. My parents barely left their room. Ethan tried once to talk to Rachel, but she avoided him completely. On the flight home, I stared out the window and understood something with painful clarity. Some betrayals don't need to be loud to be permanent. They just need to be seen. The moment we returned home, something inside me shut down. Not in a dramatic way, not with tears or shouting. It was quieter than that, like a door closing softly but permanently. Ethan felt it too. We didn't even have to discuss it. The distance formed naturally, instinctively. We stopped answering calls. At first, I assumed Linda would give it time. That embarrassment alone might force reflection. that maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how far she'd gone and come back with genuine remorse. That hope lasted 3 days. The first voicemail came late at night. Linda's voice trembled, thick with emotion, but not regret. She talked about how everything got blown out of proportion, how families fight sometimes, how she just wanted to move past it. There was no apology. The next message was longer. She talked about how stressful the vacation had been for her, how frightened she'd felt losing something so valuable, how anyone in her position would have reacted the same way. Ethan deleted it halfway through. When he stopped answering entirely, she turned to me. Texts, missed calls, emails, each one framed the same way. She was the victim, and we were being cruel by refusing to talk. She said I was poisoning Ethan against his family, that I was overreacting, that nothing really happened to my parents or me. Nothing really happened. That phrase echoed in my head every time I remembered my mother's shaking hands, the way my father had stared at the ground while a stranger searched his belongings. Then Linda escalated. One afternoon, while Ethan was at work, there was a knock at the door. I froze. I already knew. The knocking came again, sharper this time, then her voice, calling my name through the door, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Barbara, I know you're home. I didn't open the door. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, waiting for her to leave. She didn't. After nearly 10 minutes, I cracked the door open just enough to see her face. She immediately leaned forward, trying to step into my space. We need to talk, she said, like she had every right to be there. I have nothing to say, I replied. She sighed dramatically, shaking her head. I shouldn't have called the police, she admitted. But before I could react, she added, but honestly, if you were in my position, you would have done the same thing. There it was. No accountability, just justification. She told me she could never have imagined Rachel stealing from her, that a mother always trusts her own child, that she'd simply followed logic. I looked her straight in the eye. Then you don't know your daughter as well as you think you do. Her expression hardened. That's when she changed tactics. She told me Rachel was struggling financially, that her ex-boyfriend had stopped paying child support months ago, that Rachel had been drowning quietly, too proud to ask for help. According to Linda, the earrings were never meant to be stolen, just borrowed. Rachel was always going to give them back. As if that erased everything. As if desperation excused letting innocent people be dragged through public humiliation. Linda leaned closer, lowering her voice. She's ashamed, she said. You should have some compassion. I felt something snap. Compassion? I repeated. Where was your compassion when my parents were being searched? She waved her hand dismissively. That was unfortunate, but... No, I cut in. That was unforgivable. I told her I would never forgive her, not because of the earrings, but because of what she revealed about herself. The way she accused without proof, the way she doubled down, the way she protected the guilty and punished the innocent without hesitation. I told her to leave. When she scoffed and called me disrespectful, I stayed calm. When she said I was destroying the family, I didn't argue. I simply told her that if she ever showed up unannounced again, I would call the police. Her face twisted with rage. I closed the door. That night, I finally told Ethan everything. He didn't defend her. He didn't minimize it. He listened, quietly, completely, and then told me something that broke my heart in a different way. I've been making excuses for her my whole life, he said. I don't want to do that anymore. For the first time since the cruise, I slept without replaying the scene in my head. But peace, I learned, doesn't come without resistance. I thought that closing the door on Linda, literally and emotionally, would be the end of it. I underestimated how deeply she needed control. For about a week after that confrontation, there was silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. I allowed myself to believe that maybe, finally, she had heard me. That embarrassment and time had forced her to step back and accept reality. That illusion shattered quietly. It started with unfamiliar phone numbers, messages left without names, just emotional pleas. Some were apologetic in tone, carefully worded, vague, never quite admitting wrongdoing. Others were accusatory, hinting that Ethan and I were being cruel, that I was holding him hostage emotionally. Then the relatives joined in. Aunties, cousins, people I'd met maybe once or twice, suddenly reaching out as if they had front row seats to the entire ordeal. They urged us to let it go. They said Linda was devastated, that she was suffering, that she didn't mean it the way it came out. Not one of them asked how my parents were doing. Not one of them acknowledged the humiliation, the police, the accusations. To them, the problem wasn't what Linda had done. It was that we refused to absorb it quietly. Ethan tried one last time. He called her, not to reconcile, but to draw a line. He told her clearly that if she continued contacting us, continued sending people after us, continued showing up unannounced, we would take action. She cried, she denied, she blamed. She said I had turned him against her. That was the moment Ethan finally stopped trying to explain. The next time Linda showed up at our house, she didn't knock politely. She pounded on the door. I stood in the hallway, heart racing, listening to her voice rise outside, loud enough for neighbors to hear, loud enough to humiliate us the same way she had humiliated my parents. Ethan opened the door before I could stop him. She immediately launched into a speech about forgiveness, about family, about how I was holding on to bitterness and poisoning our future. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He told her to leave. When she refused, when she stepped forward as if she still had authority in our home, he did something I had never seen him do before. He pulled out his phone. "If you don't leave," he said calmly, "I'm calling the police." For a brief moment, Linda looked stunned, then furious. She called us ungrateful, accused me of manipulating him, claimed we were punishing her unfairly while Rachel was the real victim. That was when something inside me clicked into place. This was never going to end on its own. That night, Ethan and I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight. The house was quiet. My parents had already told me they didn't want to be involved anymore. They were exhausted, emotionally bruised, and deeply hurt. "I don't want to live like this," I told Ethan, always waiting for the next ambush. Neither did he. So we spoke to a lawyer. We documented everything. The calls, the messages, the visits, the harassment, the emotional distress, the impact on my parents, the repeated refusal to respect boundaries. And then we filed. When Linda found out we were suing her for harassment and emotional distress, she reacted exactly as expected. Shock, outrage, tears. She told everyone who would listen that her own son had betrayed her, that she was being punished for one mistake, that she was the real victim in all of this. What she never mentioned, what she carefully avoided, was why. She never spoke about the false accusations, the police, the way she dragged my parents through public humiliation, the way she doubled down instead of apologizing. For the first time, though, there were consequences she couldn't cry her way out of. Ethan stood by me without hesitation. One night, as we sat together on the couch after another long day of phone calls and paperwork, he said something that stayed with me. "I didn't lose my family," he said quietly. "I just finally saw them clearly." And I realized something too. Winning the lottery didn't change us. It didn't make Linda cruel. It didn't make Rachel steal. It didn't make the rest of the family look the other way. It just removed the excuses. We didn't destroy a family. We refused to sacrifice our dignity to preserve an illusion. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something real settle in my chest. Not anger, not fear, not guilt. Peace.